The man was walking alone through the streets of Binghamton, New York, tired, homeless, invisible to most people around him. But that night, someone noticed him, not because they wanted to help, but because they wanted content. According to police, a group of teenagers spotted him and saw him as the perfect target for a viral video. Not a human being, not someone's son, not someone with a life and a story, just a trend, just entertainment. And within minutes, that decision would leave a man fighting for his life and shock an entire country. It happened late at night near Carroll Street. The area was quiet, almost empty, when 5 boys between the ages of 13 and 15 approached 45-year-old Peter Benedum. Investigators say the teens surrounded him before the violence suddenly exploded. Punches, kicks, stomps to the head and body, over and over again. According to police, the attack was so brutal that Peter was left unconscious in the street with catastrophic injuries. And the most horrifying part, authorities believe the teens were inspired by a disturbing social media trend where vulnerable people are attacked on camera for views and attention. Think about that for a second. People used to risk their lives for fame. Now some are willing to destroy someone else's life for a few seconds of internet attention. And police say this case may be one of the darkest examples yet. Hours after the attack, officers found Peter unconscious, barely alive. His injuries were severe: head trauma, internal damage, his body broken from repeated blows. He was rushed to the hospital and placed on life support, but according to reports from his family, doctors didn't believe he would survive. Loved ones were already preparing funeral arrangements while the investigation continued. And while Peter was fighting for his life in a hospital bed, detectives were trying to answer one terrifying question. Why would teenagers do this? Why would children allegedly attack a random homeless man with this level of cruelty? And the answer investigators uncovered was deeply disturbing. Police said there had been a growing online trend involving attacks on homeless or vulnerable individuals being filmed and shared online, almost like a sick challenge, a competition for shock value. According to authorities, this wasn't random rage, it was performance violence, violence designed to be watched. Captain Matthew Hodnick described the attack as heinous and disgusting, saying he couldn't understand how juveniles could see this behavior as acceptable or even something to be proud of. And the more details emerged, the darker the story became, because investigators quickly identified the suspects: 5 boys, all from Binghamton, all incredibly young. 2 were 15 years old, 2 were 14, and 1 was just 13. Old enough to know what violence is, but still young enough that the entire community was left asking the same question: how did things get this far? 4 of the teens were charged with attempted murder and sent to a juvenile detention facility in Syracuse, while the 13-year-old was released to a guardian pending additional charges. And that decision immediately sparked outrage online. People couldn't believe someone connected to such a brutal assault could return home, even temporarily. But then another layer of the case started spreading online, one that made the entire story even more disturbing. Social media users and local residents began claiming there may have been other videos, other alleged attacks on homeless individuals. Some Reddit users claimed the suspects had posted clips online before, videos showing vulnerable people being humiliated and beaten, while others laughed behind the camera. These claims haven't all been officially confirmed by police, but the discussion exploded across local forums and social media platforms, and people started asking if this was bigger than one attack, if this had become a dangerous underground trend among teenagers searching for online attention. The internet reaction was immediate: rage, heartbreak, confusion. Many people focused on the cruelty of the attack itself, but others became obsessed with a deeper fear. What happens when violence becomes entertainment? When likes and views start rewarding shock instead of humanity? Because for years, social media platforms have pushed increasingly extreme content. Prank videos became humiliation videos. Humiliation videos became fights. And now police were connecting online trends to an attempted murder case involving children.
And maybe the most chilling part is how normal these teenagers probably looked before the attack. Classmates, students, kids walking around the neighborhood like anyone else. Nothing about them would immediately scream danger.
But investigators believe that behind closed doors, behind phone screens, something darker was growing. Something fueled by online validation and group mentality. Psychologists often talk about mob behavior, how people in groups sometimes lose their individual sense of responsibility. Things they would never do alone suddenly become possible when others are encouraging them, filming them, laughing with them. And social media amplifies that effect, because now the audience isn't just 5 friends standing nearby, it could be millions of strangers online. According to reports, Peter Benedum wasn't bothering anyone that night. He wasn't threatening anyone. He was simply walking alone, vulnerable, easy to target, and somehow that made him valuable to people searching for content. The case also reignited conversations about homelessness in America, because many people pointed out a painful truth. Homeless individuals are often ignored until tragedy happens, invisible until they become victims. Community members in Binghamton held vigils for Peter, lighting candles near the location of the attack, grieving a man many never knew personally, but now couldn't stop thinking about. Binghamton Mayor Jared Crom publicly condemned the attack, calling it abhorrent and inexplicable, saying the entire community was struggling to understand how young people could commit such violence. And honestly, that's what makes this case so haunting. There's no simple explanation, no easy answer that makes this feel less terrifying, because this wasn't about money, revenge, or survival. According to investigators, this may have been about attention, about internet culture, about the idea that if something shocking gets enough views, it becomes worth doing. And that possibility scares people more than almost anything else. Imagine being Peter in those final conscious moments, surrounded by teenagers, hearing laughter, hearing phones recording, realizing you aren't being attacked because someone hates you personally, but because you became content, because your suffering entertained someone. And then imagine the families of those teenagers, parents waking up to discover their children were now accused in a near-fatal attempted murder case connected to a social media trend. Entire lives destroyed in a single night. Victims on both sides, though in very different ways. The story spread far beyond New York because people everywhere recognized the deeper danger. This wasn't just a local crime anymore. It was a warning about what can happen when online culture rewards cruelty, when empathy disappears behind screens, when violence becomes performance. And there's another terrifying question hidden inside this case. How many attacks never get reported? How many vulnerable people are targeted because attackers assume no one will care? Homeless individuals already live dangerous lives, but now authorities are warning about trends where they're specifically targeted because they're seen as powerless. As the investigation continues, prosecutors will likely focus on proving intent, proving the teenagers understood the consequences of their actions. But online, people are debating something even bigger. Should social media companies bear responsibility when violent trends spread, when algorithms reward shocking content, when children chase virality without understanding where the line is? Because for years, platforms have trained users to chase reactions, more views, more likes, more attention, and in extreme cases, some people stop caring how they get it. What happened to Peter Benedum forced people to confront an uncomfortable reality. Technology didn't create violence, but it may be changing the way violence spreads, the way it's encouraged, the way it's performed, and maybe even the way people emotionally disconnect from it. The image of a homeless man lying unconscious on a street while teenagers allegedly recorded the attack horrified the public because it felt symbolic of something bigger, a culture becoming numb, where suffering can become background entertainment on a screen before someone scrolls to the next video. And the saddest part is that Peter Benedum reportedly tried to help people despite his own struggles. Family members described him as kind, someone who still cared about others, even while facing homelessness himself, which makes the ending even harder to process. Because in the end, this wasn't just a crime story, it became a reflection of a generation growing up online, a story about empathy disappearing behind cameras,
and a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the world isn't anger, it's when people stop seeing others as human. And somewhere in Binghamton, candles still flicker near the place where Peter was attacked, a reminder of one horrifying night when a man lost his life and a group of teenagers may have lost their future, all because someone thought violence could go viral.